Welcome to the Mindful CIO podcast, where we explore the human side of tech leadership and what it takes to mindfully and sustainably lead high-performing tech teams. Welcome to episode 2 of the Mindful CIO podcast with Ben Allwood, CIO at IPD Group. In this episode, we started a conversation with Ben sharing his baptism by fire at IPD Group when he joined the company in the middle of a crisis caused by a cyber incident. Talk about a crash course in leadership. Ben shared his view on healthy culture, which is, in his opinion, not necessarily about being happy, but instead it involves allowing respectful disagreement and even tension among team members so people can feel safe enough to be assertive, have a voice, and be heard. Ben spoke about the importance of establishing boundaries when dealing with multiple time zones, the power of pause to address critical issues, and the benefits of neurodivergent teams. He also shared his strategies to successfully and effectively communicating with board members. Finally, Ben reflected on how the tough decision of leaving an organization or role that no longer fits may be the best choice, leading to better opportunities and further career growth. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. Okay, here we are. So welcome, Ben. Thanks for accepting the invitation to join us in the Mindful CIO podcast. Great to have you here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So I'll go through Ben's bio and then we'll start the conversation. So today we have Ben Allwood, CIO of the IPD Group. Ben has extensive experience in digital transformation, cybersecurity, privacy, and risk management. Ben has established robust governance frameworks and broken down barriers of technology risk at board level, enabling IPD's IPO process. Having completed 5 acquisitions in 3 years, Ben is well versed in the human side of change management and the stresses it can put onto all the teams affected by the process. Outside of his professional life, he stays in contact with his engineering roots, designing embedded systems for real-time control systems and edge AI in his spare time, just for fun. And I heard, Ben, Bluebird told me that you are also into cycling and gardening, but that's maybe off the records.
Yeah. Well, I used to do a bit of racing and stuff in the day, but the children have definitely slowed things down these days. But no, it is good. And I do quite enjoy trying to incorporate the youngins into activities we do. And actually, one of the last projects I did from a PCB design point of view, which I mentioned before, was engaging with my children to build their own solution from start to finish with some simple PCBs and some simple circuitry and things. And it was really good to get engagement with the kids and get them to understand the world around them. But a few things on the outside of work too, for sure.
Wonderful. Lucky Dan. So you're getting that engineering mindset embedded in them as soon as you can.
at least so they can understand if even something they want to do or move away from, for sure. Yeah.
Good stuff. So in addition to your official, a subset of your official polished bio, Ben, is there anything that you'd like to share with the listeners in terms of how you got here, a little bit of your journey?
Yeah. So, look, I think I sort of didn't really ever consider going into this sort of field. I think it's something that is evolved over time. I started as an engineer, mostly in control systems and robotics, and went to an infomechatronic engineering degree many years ago, and that led me into machine design and things. I started working with which obviously has an IT component to it. And then I during the GFC, I got out of that side of things because manufacturing sort of fell to its knees a bit in Australia. But But prior to that, it did give me the experience to go and design machines and travel all around the world and install these machines, commission things, and the likes. But I went into the mostly coal industry afterwards, as I live in Queensland, and that's what we have up here. We have coal and we have a bit of an oil and gas industry, obviously. And so that got me into the project management. And then from there, I did some really good projects with lots of different companies, mostly Logicams at the time, which is now owned, has a different owner. But working in for them, I was lucky enough to be the project manager for the largest control system project ever in the country, which is a great learning experience. I had some really good mentors on that project, both from a people management point of view, but also from a legal and compliance point of view. And I learned a lot from that, and especially too how to deal with technical leadership and the challenges that managing a large technical team can have. And then I did some other large projects with them, whether they were I did a major project at the most isolated processing plant in the world, and that was exciting. I was there for about a year and a half. And then after that, there was a bit of a downturn in the market, and I was made redundant from Logicams, which ended up being a blessing, as in that it made me take note of what I was doing with my career and where I wanted to go. And then I sort of changed tack completely. I went and worked in R&D for a while, medical R&D and some laser physics stuff. That was really exciting. And that too helped me understand where I wanted to move, but I was getting into more operations management, worked for a medical infrastructure company for a while as an operations manager. And then I basically got a phone call from, at the time, the owners of the Control Logic business, which was later acquired by IPD, took on an operations and general management role here. And about a year later, it was acquired by IPD. And during my time at Control Logic, before it was acquired, I'd rolled out a whole digital transformation piece. And so when the acquisition came along, the new owners said, "Hey, you've just done all that stuff over there. How about you come and do the same thing again for the rest of the business?" And so I ended up becoming the CIO of the business, and took on the role, I think it was 2 months earlier than I was supposed to, because I got a phone call at 2 a.m. saying, "We've been hacked. We need you to start now." And so that was a baptism by fire, if there ever was one. But it was a really good experience in itself too, because that's the best way to learn who your new team is. It's like you walk into a situation and everything's on fire. You're on fire. They're on fire. The fire's on fire, and you have to try and get to a stage where you don't know how long this is going to go on for. You need to contain, you need to control, and you need to make sure that you don't kill your people in the meantime. That you make sure you're protecting them from the emotional challenges that come with working in a very reactive space for a potentially large portion of time, and where they feel like they're going to be attacked from every single angle because they're the IT team and there's an IT problem. So naturally, they feel like everyone is there to blame them. So being able to manage that culture, manage those challenges came up. That was really exciting. And what came out of it was a good understanding of the team and a really good camaraderie within the team. I think we started off. We started off in a bad place, but it ended up giving us a good outcome. Yeah. So yeah, wow. that's where I've got to where I am today.
What a trajectory! Thanks for sharing, Ben. Wow, it feels like I'm hearing the hero's journey. Thanks for sharing the redundancy with Logicams, if I got it right, and being vulnerable there. Thanks for sharing that piece. I think now is a difficult time in tech. So many people going through that process, and sometimes, as you said, it can be a blessing in disguise, right? Allow you to reevaluate things and review which direction of your career was going to, and then of course join IVP in such a critical moment where in the middle of a crisis where you didn't have time to develop your brand and to build relationships. You were straight into it, right? So yeah, very interesting. And clearly you've done really well, because you've been with the organization for, nearly 7 years, I guess, and gone through, a number of merger and acquisitions and so on. Cool. Thanks for sharing, Ben. So next, I'm curious to hear, of course, you've been a member of the Mindful SEO community for a while. What aspects of the Mindful SEO Manifesto do you relate the most, if any?
Yeah. So for sure. So the second iteration of the manifesto, firstly, I think is a lot better than the first one. I find having more than about 4 or 5 points on anything, it tends to get lost. And the first one had a lot of detail there, which is really good. But the second one I find really, really useful. If I look at where it is, the manifesto as a whole, I think the four big points there, I think they should form the basis of a set of values that a business has, or a person has, or a leader has. To me, I think the two standout ones for me are around diversity and culture, and I think they're all interlinked, but I think those two a lot more than others. For me, I think that healthy culture isn't necessarily happy culture, and a lot of times people think that healthy means happy. To me, it doesn't. To me, a healthy culture is one where there can be a little bit of tension, there can be disagreement, but there's an underlying respect and there's a level of communication across all your team members. And I think that's really, really important, because I find that if people are heard and people have a voice and they're considered, then it's much easier to understand those when there's issues with work boundaries, when there's issues with people worried about being assertive or not. If some people feel like if they speak up, they're going to be pushed down, and I think it's really important that we don't. One of the things I learned many years ago was you look at things like Deepwater Horizon, you look at Challenger from the spacecraft, and you look at some of the challenges that those disasters had leading up to it, and a lot of the time it was that no one said no, that no one put their hands up and said, hey, what about if we look at this from this other point of view? And I think healthy culture is one that really, really encourages people to have that communication, and you're going to do that through respecting everyone.
Couldn't agree more, Ben. Yes, 100%. And I think, to be honest, it's hard to admit. I can't remember from the top of my head what we had underlined the healthy culture principle. But from memory, especially from the Manifesto 1.0, which I wrote by myself, the 2.0, we had a help from the working group, was really around being able to establish boundaries and preventing burnouts. That was the crux of the healthy culture for us. But you're right, no healthy conflict, absolutely. Patrick Lencioni from Public Functions of the team, he's a big, championing trust is the foundation of any high-performing team, and then healthy conflict. As you said, if people cannot disagree respectfully, you don't have innovation, you don't have, creativity being exercised, and so on. Yes. Agree. Cool. So thank you for that. Moving on to talking a little bit more about you, Ben. In terms of, self-care, talking about boundaries and preventing burnout, what would you say? Do you have any strategies for, routines or rituals for self-care? Anything that you do to keep yourself sane mentally, physically, emotionally?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that I think most people who get to a senior position in any organization, whether it's a technical role, it's a non-technical role, they're typically either amazing diplomats, or they probably work a little bit harder than longer than they probably should all the time. And I think one of the challenges that I've faced, I definitely, according to my wife especially, I'm a workaholic, and that managing that is very difficult. And that's one of the hardest things that I have, is to try and pull back when necessary. Especially people in any sort of role that really want to drive change and make a difference. Sometimes they see problems, especially engineers, we're terrible for it. We just want to fix it. And sometimes you have to realize and remind yourself that, well, you can go and fix every single problem yourself, and you can fix 10 problems, or you can help other people to understand that, there's these problems, and get them to take ownership of those problems and help people establish ownership. And that's always harder, but it's a better way to do it. So I remind myself that to start with, and I try and listen to the people around me if I'm not listening to myself, because sometimes we get caught up in the moment, and that is difficult. So I make sure I listen to my wife to start with. She don't tell her I said that, but she'll often let me know if I'm doing too much. I think having a physical outlet too is always really important. So whether it's cycling, whether it's gardening, whether it's something else, I think for me that's really important, that I spend time doing that, because that's a good reset point. Reading is really important to me too, whether it's actually physically reading a book, whether it's reading audio books while I'm driving, so not actually reading, but I find that those sort of things help reset me. And I used to do things like, I still do sometimes, but I used to use my drive to learn new skills, my commute to work to learn new skills, but I don't do that quite as much anymore. Now I actually use it as a reset period between home and work. I also, when I work from home, I've got a dedicated work area which is only used for work, and that's how I separate out my work life and home life. Is that when I walk through that door in my home office, that's work then. When I walk outside that door, that's home then, and that's really important for me, because especially in this industry, and with I've got offices, I've got people who work in 4 or 5 countries now, separated across 6 time zones. It's challenging. You can't always work in your local time zone. You have to work with, and let alone my vendors are spread across pretty much every time zone. So being able to make sure that, in the office is one thing, but trying to establish that time at home too, and separate that out is really important. Listen to yourself, listen to the people around you, I think is probably the most important takeaway there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for sharing. And in terms of a great leadership, you mentioned a couple of people that helped you in the beginning of your journey. Does anyone come to mind, or if not, maybe someone that you work directly, or a public figure, or any traits of great leaders that you kind of use as a reference for you? Yeah. So for me, it's no one particular person, but it's a few key people that I've worked with across my journey. I think my first boss when I was a graduate engineer, one of the things I learned from him more so than anyone else was the ability to stop and think and take a moment. I don't do it as well as he does. He was really, really good at it. And I think that made him a really effective leader. It also made him not be so reactive, but more proactive to problems. And it also, it made him a good person to work with. So I try to channel, his name was Mark. I try to channel Mark whenever I can. He really did help me understand that component. And help me navigate complex tactical situations, I think, by just taking that moment, even when the world is on fire. I learned really good people management while I was at Logicams from a gentleman named Paul. And Paul Walker, his name was, unrelated to the actor. Yeah, he taught me how to do good people negotiations and how to work through some of the softer side of things, which prior to that, working completely in the technical space, I really hadn't had much exposure to. And that was really, really beneficial. And I took a lot away from him, not only just by watching, but he was one of those guys that actually take a moment to explain. We're going to go in, we're going to do this. This is why we're going to do this. And that was really useful, and I found that really helpful. And then another gentleman named Paul, who was the company secretary at the time and a lawyer, he showed me more of the commercial side of things than the other Paul did, and that was really, really useful too, because obviously those are important things, that to be able to have a robust commercial conversation with someone but still walk out happy, where both parties
can go and have a meal afterwards or something like that. It's really, really important when you're trying to build a longer term relationships. But you might be having a few disagreements during that year period. That happens. I think they were really important in setting me up for going forward in my career. Yeah.
Fantastic. Sounds like you had some great mentors along the way, Ben. That's great. Let's shift gears to storytelling time. Shall we?
Sure.
So you mentioned, you shared a little bit about your point of view on culture. That culture not necessarily means that people are happy all the time. And is there anything else that you want to touched on in terms of culture? What's your view on there? Maybe perhaps a story or a situation that you experienced?
Yeah. I think like culture is really, really important to me. It's really important to IPD as an organization as well. And it took us a few acquisitions to work this out, but it's something that when we go for an acquisition, it's something we look at really closely is the culture of the organization and making sure that it's not too disparate from the rest of the business. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that when you're working with these people and you're purchasing this business, that you're not going to destroy it. We're in the process of buying companies for growth. We're not one of those companies that gets there and pulls all the good bits off and sells them at great rates. We actually want to find good businesses that they're on a cusp of not being able to take their business to the next level, and by us joining together, we can be more than the sum of the parts, and we can go a little bit further than what they could have done by themselves, and that's been really a really good strategy for us. So when we go on and look at those businesses, that's one of the things we need to consider. But those businesses that are usually got to a particular stage, they might not have. And I'll use cybersecurity as an example. They might not have the same cybersecurity posture as the rest of our business, or they might not have the same IT systems as the rest of our business, or payroll systems, or whatever it might be. And so we have to be really careful when we go to take that business from wherever it is to alignment with the rest of our group, to make sure that we don't break the bits that made us want to buy it in the first place. And a lot of that is people. And look, our one of our core values as a business is actually people first. Respect every individual, value their unique perspectives, and also things like your knowledge and strength together. So how we do it when we go on, we move into an acquisition phase, and we're trying to bring them on board. We do it by a few different ways. Firstly, we find a few key people in those organizations that are pivotal to the success of that organization. And we talk to them, we listen to them, we understand their point of view. And sometimes when we go to join things together, we find that the way that the new business does things is actually better in a particular way than what we do things. So we take that on board, because that's what we're all here to grow. We're all here to have those to enable each other, to enable the businesses to grow at the same time. So I think that's one of the really cool things of where we are, where I am now, is that we've got a leadership team which not only wants to grow and build out these business units as we get them, but do it in a way that actually promotes the bits that made them really good to start with. So as we go through those integration processes, it's really about understanding what the challenges are, but trying to preserve what makes them good, and bring our people together to enable that to happen.
Awesome. So it sounds like, for me, a growth mindset in action, right? Now it's clearly, I think the leadership team at IPD must have this open mind approach to acknowledge, well, if these process or these particular part of the business is actually operating better than us, let's leverage that, and
Yeah,
take the chance to upgrade your culture.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So we do try to focus on just like trying to lift the whole business as a whole and learning from others. It, it is always a challenge when you come into a new organization, because change is hard for people, generally speaking, but it can make it a little bit easier if they understand that, hey, no, we're not changing who you are. We're here to give you some love. And one of our last acquisitions, a company called CMI, we acquired CMI. I think it was February this year. It was signed on the dotted line, so to speak. And one of the challenges we had with that particular business was from an IT infrastructure point of view, there hadn't been a lot of investment in that area. And we went into some of the offices and things, and you'd see people who are missing keys or keyboards that they were using in clients from about 10 or so years ago. And it works, it all worked, but it wasn't a great user experience. So it was a really good opportunity for us to come in and really lift that business up and make sure that we gave, I guess, hypercare to the individuals, because sometimes people forget that when you're going through an acquisition, there's the business side of it, and it's all very fun and exciting, but there's a personal side of it too. And you've got individuals who are worried about, okay, am I going to lose my job? How am I going to deal with all this change that's happening? I mean, we really understand that when we go to acquire a business, that we're not just acquiring all this technology and these customers and product. We're acquiring, in the instance of CMI, we're acquiring 75 individuals for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So we're acquiring we're taking them away from their families. We're paying for their children's schools. We're making sure that they can go out on a Friday night. It's important that we take the human side of whatever we're doing into consideration when we acquire those businesses. And I think we really do. And I think we really, now done it a few times, we really understand the importance of the people side of it. And which, it's really good to work in a place where you have the ability to respect the individual.
Super. Something that came to mind now listening to you, Ben, it's cultural fit versus cultural diversity, right? Because I think some people would argue, we want cultural diversity, is true, but the reality is, merging a large organization like IPD with acquired organization, it's a lot of work, right, to integrate the new staff into the existing structure. So I think it's a bit of a preamble to my actual question. So do you feel that, or have you witnessed that already, a situation where you evaluating a company that you wanted to acquire, you would actually decide to walk away because it wasn't really a great fit or would be too hard to integrate those cultures? Do you think that could happen, or have you seen that happening? Would you?
Look, it's definitely something that's come across our table before, and we've definitely walked away from businesses that aren't a good fit, because that is really important. I think too, if extending on the culture thing and going back to the manifesto too, you do want to, just because I'm saying that we need to have a similar culture doesn't mean it's the same culture, and it also doesn't mean the same culture for all parts of the organization. Our sales team has very, very different personalities to our data engineers and our data scientists. And I would hope they did. Exactly. I'd hope they did. I really do. So I know one of the points in the manifesto is, don't quote me, I think it's human skills over technical prowess. And that one there, I sort of flip it around, depends on the team that I'm talking about, because I think both are equally important. And I think when it comes to diversity, especially, to me, diversity really means diversity of thought, diversity of experience. And I see this in technical teams everywhere. So whether it's C teams, whether it's an engineering consultancy, whether it's an accountancy firm, whether it's a law firm, where if you're working in a hospital, what you typically find with those particular demographics is you'll have a lot more neurodivergent people than you will in other places. such as a sales team. And you know what? It's fantastic because they look at things from a different point of view than a salesperson would. And you want them to, because you need the ability of a salesperson and a good public speaker and someone who's really outgoing to do that front end work. But you also need them to be supported and for someone to be crossing all those T's and dotting all those I's and making sure that the solution that you're talking about is going to work for the customer, and that we are making sure we're covering the risk appetite of the business and all these other things. I think a good organization can understand. It might not use the words the same as the manifesto, but it understands that, hey, I need a different type of skill set and a different type of emotional intelligence in this particular individual than I do for someone who's out on the road selling like the products that these guys are either making or making sure that we can get for the customer. So that's really important. And I think we actually do that pretty well too, which takes a little bit of adaptation when you're growing out a different business. And I find too that the people that adapt the least well to change are the people that sit in that often those technical spaces, because we're finance and IT tend to be very structured type people, and engineering teams, which we have a few different types of engineering teams. So it's really good in many ways, because we can make it work for our teams, we can make it work for everyone. So that's always a good litmus test for us too.
Totally. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Being a very highly analytical person myself, originally, I think having to work on developing my own emotional intelligence, I totally can relate to the engineering, accountant, finance people style of thinking and working and seeing things.
Yeah, absolutely. And to flip it around the other way too, it's if I look at risk and technical risk and trying to make sure that we get those messages across to the right people. You have a conversation with your cybersecurity team and you talk technical risk, and they get excited. They love it. It's what they do. It's what they live and breathe. And you can talk to them all day about vulnerability management tools and how to make sure that you limit lateral movement within your network and things like that. And they're doing backflips. They're so excited. But you go and have that same conversation with the board, and that's a very, very different audience, and it should be. But that's actually one of the challenges that initially we had in the organization is we've got all these new visibility on problems, because when the day I started, there was a major cybersecurity fire. That was a blessing and a curse, of course. It was a blessing because the board really their ears pricked up and went, oh, this is actually a problem. And at about the same point in time, Australian Institute of Company Directors was coming out and saying, hey, there's this thing called cybersecurity and you really need to pay attention to it. And it's really important. And
this was 7 years ago, right, Ben?
No, so 7 years ago I was in control. This is about 3.5.
3 years ago, okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm asking is because I was at the AICD event this morning, and the top three topics of the agenda were, surprise, surprise, AI, number 2, cybersecurity, and climate governance. So it is still, of course, top of mind, 3 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have my GAICD qualification myself. I attend a lot of those functions, and it's really actually good to see that boards across Australia are moving in that direction and getting that understanding, because it is super important. But it is still really hard for a board member to understand. And as technical leaders in the business, whether it's for working in IT, cybersecurity, or other corporate governance, generally, whether climate change is as a great example, we need to be able to break those problems down into language that the board can understand. And really, risk is your friend there. A board is a lot of board members have a law background, they have a finance background. They typically understand risk as a general rule. They understand what risk is. So you need to break it down into terms that they understand. And look, that was one of the things that I spent a lot of time doing when I initially took over this role was reframing everything, reframing the problem set into language that the board could understand, and then putting some values, some timeframes, some tangible items against those things, and not just running there with a fear-mongering campaign. So cybersecurity is the biggest problem. You're going to lose your information. There's a guy sitting down the road wearing a black hoodie who's going to destroy this company. It's, no, look, this is just a risk like everything else. This is how we can mitigate this down to our risk appetite level. And let's put some investment in this area. We can maintain that risk. So look, what was good was, in a way, was we had that initial incident, which, by the way, we got control of really, really quickly. But it really enabled that conversation with the board. And 3.5 years ago, cybersecurity was something that, people were saying, like I said, AICD was putting their hand up and saying, hey, guys, pay attention to this. This is starting to be a thing. But it really was still only early days. So I think now it's a different, boards are a lot more aware of the challenges, but having a board back then that was willing to listen to that issue, and by the way, many other issues, is really, what's the word, I guess? Empowering, I guess. You know that I'm working with a leadership team, a board team that gives you the authority for the things you're accountable for. And that's something actually we try to push down all the way through down to your junior engineers and your sales teams. Is if you're trying to do something and you have to do something as part of your job, I'm going to give you the authority for whatever that is, whatever you need to do, and make sure that we're not removing that DOA way up out of their control where they just feel like a pawn in a game. So that's another learning, I guess, that came out of that as well.
Brilliant. So what I'm thinking here, when I was reviewing your bio and with your engineering background, Ben, I would say, I don't know if I should say that, but I will say anyway, I think it's a bit unusual, right? We see an engineer with such a good communication negotiation skills, and you kind of gave us a hint of how did you develop those skills with some mentors and perhaps natural to your personality as well. I don't know if that's the case, but you clearly have that gift of the engineering problem solver mind together with the really good skills around negotiation, human skills, and emotional intelligence as well. So I guess having those conversations, as you said, reframing the language, using the language in the board that is understandable, translating to the language that the board members, board directors can understand, is something that you've been doing really well because you're invited to risk committees often and so on. So in addition to reframing and choosing the language carefully, are there any other practical tips for those listening who are not as gifted as you are in speaking board language? And if I may, a second part of the question, like bundle in there, I'm thinking, you mentioned that playing with learning language models now in AI is a little bit of a hobby for you, and you do something on the side. Of course, AI is a big topic, especially in your industry, manufacturing at the moment. So are those conversations coming up? Any thoughts or suggestions for those CIOs listening or CTOs listening to us who are being challenged or having those conversations with the board around not just cyber, but also AI?
Yeah, sure. So probably just last one first. So I guess without going into technical details, a lot of things for any of your Australian listeners, there's some significant changes in the I'll say somewhat significant changes in the privacy legislation this year, which is aligning what we do in Australia more to how GDPR works. But what's also interesting and what's happening in the same time is it seems, and I'm not a legal professional by any means, but it seems that there's going to be more enforcement the next few years around the Cybersecurity Critical Infrastructure Act. And there's a lot of overlap now between those two places. So businesses that work in that space really need to start paying attention to what personal information that they have that they control, that they could be using for certain, for example, AI models or other things like that. So I think understanding the governance requirements around privacy is super important at the moment. And that's really important if you're looking at developing things like large language models. A lot of people are looking at, for example, AI-based chatbots to assist with their customer service teams. For example, we use some GTP4 style large language models for helping our internal team work out what products they should use for a particular customer's use case to try and help them, consolidate their thought process before they go to the application engineering team, and to try and fast track those first few questions and things, as well as understanding what's going to work based on what we've got in stock versus what those customer needs are. We also use it for things like transcribing calls and other things. So, and that particular one is a bit of a tricky one. You have to be super careful with, because you have to know where your information is and what you're storing, what you're collecting, and where it is. I guess if we look at the challenges that Optus and Medibank have had over the last period or so, if to put an analogy to it, it was like they've got a really big castle and they left one of the doors open, but their castle is so big they didn't even realize there was a door left open. So yeah, understanding what you have and being able to at least know where things are is going to be super important when people start doing things like collecting, transcribing all your calls, and making sure that you've got that you're collecting your customer data in a way that you can use to help that customer through the product journey. So that's super important, and we use a lot of different tools for that. I won't go into the detail, but just make sure whatever you're using, you know where your information is. Large language models are really cool, really capable of helping you and your team, but don't. I see a lot of people trying to find a problem for a solution that they've made with the technology. So don't be that person. Wait until people are crying out for a need before you go and try and put it in there. By all means, go and learn how it works. Go and learn how retrieval augmented generation works, and understand what a graph database is versus a vector store. Go and do that for sure, but don't go and try and apply it to your business until you actually have a need. I think that's one of the biggest things I see in change management. The difference between a successful project and one that falls on its face is IT should not be the one to drive the change in the business. IT is there to help provide the solution from a technical point of view, help to guide people. But when we roll out a sales solution, when we roll out a CRM or estimation tool, sure, I'll get my IT team involved in that initial training and that initial change management, but we train trainers. We don't train the teams, because my team will speak IT, and that is not sales. It's not the same thing. It's important that we get that ownership within some key people within those other teams. And they're the projects. When we do that, and that happens well, and that ownership exists in that team because there was pain in that team, and we get to drive change that they see as an enabler. They're the projects that we see as super successful. Of course, in this day and age where security is a problem, and we're starting to realize that security by obscurity is no longer a thing, and we have to actually put in place things like multi-factor authentication and a full DevSecOps process when we're developing software, then those projects that you're changing just for security point of view, which we do those too, they're the challenging ones, and they're the ones that I always find a bit more tricky. So I guess understanding the language points there, understanding how you have those conversations with the right people on the team, when it's going to be something that's like, hey, I know this thing here that you love and you've been using for the last 5 years is working, and from your point of view is fine. We've actually got to take it away and give you this other thing, which we're going to need to spend a few years yet to make sure it's going to go in the right direction of the business. That's a hard conversation sometimes, and that's where you rely on the rest of the culture and those things around respect that I mentioned before. But yeah, in regards to board engagement and other things with the board, to the second part of your question, yeah, look, I think it comes back again to communication just generally. I'm lucky enough to have a really good board that I'm working with at the moment. and openness to different ideas and thought processes. It's not always the way it is. And I say to people who say, I'm being stonewalled all the time by the board or by the CEO or by whatever, then you have to ask, are you in the right organization? Are you a fit for this place? And that's sometimes a really hard thing to say and ask. If I go back to my time as an engineer at Logic Amps, being made redundant there, that actually made me realize that, hey, not everyone is a fit in every organization at all the time. I did really great things at Logic Amps for many, many years, ran all their flagship projects. It was great. The organization changed while I was out on site for 3 years, basically. I came back. I changed too. I was a different person. 3-4 years of working on site, of growth, personal growth, of other things. But I had a child by that time. I was a different person, and it was a different organization. And we'd gone separate ways. And had I'd stayed there, I know people who've stayed in organizations like that. You end up being very toxic, both to yourself and to the culture, and you're not helping either yourself or not. And sometimes leaving is the right choice. And I think if anyone finds themselves in a situation where they're not being listened to, and they're always at ends with their boss or with the board or whatever, it's not the right place for you. It doesn't mean you're bad at your job. It doesn't mean that they're bad at your job. It's just you're different, and it's important to find that place where you're happy, I think.
Love that. Yeah, it's a sign. I actually can think of a client that not long ago, very similar situation you described, and moved on, and it's such a much better fit where they are at now. Thanks, Ben. Lovely. So I think it's probably time for us to start to wrap up, and it would be great to hear from you. What if comes to mind, one up to 3 tips or strategies or keys to success for leading tech teams in a sustainable, mindful way? I want to ask you that question. What are the 3 keys for successfully leading mindfully, sustainably high-performing tech teams? What comes to mind to you?
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, so I guess for me, healthy culture is not just about happiness. It's about respect and communication, making sure there's a voice for everyone, and everyone has it too. To understand too that I didn't actually go into this at all, but I will mention this one now, is burnout takes many forms for many people. It doesn't just necessarily mean that you don't need to look at the person who is working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, as you need to look at them, but you also need to look at the people who are doing that because it's an anxiety issue for them. So try and understand why people are working. Understand your people, basically. Understand your people if you want to prevent burnout. That's another thing that we could spend a whole day talking about. And change management. Don't have your team drive that change. I mean, I see it all the time in other organizations. IT is not there to drive the change. They're there as an enablement tool to help solve problems. But whoever owns that problem needs to be the one to help you drive that change, and you're there to enable.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ben. We'll do another episode to unpack that statement around burnout, because it's one of my favorite. Preventing burnout is one of my favorite topics. So thanks so much, Ben. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for your time. Thanks for openly sharing your thoughts, your journey, your insights. And so that's it for now.
It's been a pleasure, man.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in and joining our discussion today. If you're learning from this podcast, please subscribe, give us a good rating, and share it with your friends. If you have any questions or suggestions about guests you'd like me to interview here in the Mindful CIO podcast, please share in the comments below. Last not least, thank you for your interest in the human side of tech leadership. See you in the next episode.